Hello, sleepy soul. Before we begin, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this with someone who likes late-night stories that feel a little too real. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. I always read those first. I used to believe danger announced itself. I thought it came with noise, with a raised voice, with a shadow you could point to and say, there, that is the thing I should run from. I learned in West Virginia that the worst kind of danger can arrive softly. It can speak gently. It can pretend to understand you. My name is Nora Vale, and before I ever ended up in Parkersburg, I had already lost the version of myself I knew how to explain. I left Akron in early October after reporting a man everyone else seemed determined to protect. I followed the rules. I wrote everything down. I went through HR, campus security, even the police. Every person along the way looked serious, nodded at the correct moments, then handed me the same invisible verdict. Not enough proof. Too many inconsistencies. A misunderstanding, maybe. A conflict, probably. What they really meant was that he had status, and I had a shaking voice. After that, the world around me narrowed. People stopped inviting me places. Friends replied with shorter messages, then no messages at all. My landlord suddenly found a clause in my lease she had never cared about before. Everywhere I went, I felt like I was being quietly removed from my own life. So I put what I could into my old Civic and left before sunrise on a Monday, with one duffel bag, a cracked phone charger, and a can of pepper spray in the cup holder. By the time I reached Parkersburg, West Virginia, it was nearly 7:35 p.m. on a cold Wednesday in November. I had $43 left, half a tank of gas, and no plan that lasted past the next meal. I pulled into a Family Dollar on Camden Avenue because its red sign was glowing and there was a handwritten "now hiring" notice taped crookedly to the glass. The manager was a man named Calvin. He was broad, middle-aged, and moved with a limp that made the keys on his belt clatter every few steps. His name tag was so scratched that the letters looked carved into metal. He asked if I could work nights, if I could lift boxes, if I could start immediately. I said yes to everything before he finished the questions. The work was exactly what I needed at first. It was repetitive, quiet, and dull enough to feel safe. There was no pressure to be charming. No one asked where I was from unless they needed directions to the closest bus stop. I could disappear into stocking carts and price labels and end caps stacked with paper plates. For the first time in months, being invisible felt less like punishment and more like shelter. I stocked paper towels, swept broken chips out of aisle 4, dragged trash bags to the back, and tried not to think about the place I had left. After 9:30 p.m., the store thinned out until it was mostly me, Calvin in the back office, and the soda coolers humming like machinery under the floor. I learned the sounds of the building because there was nothing else to do. The compressor behind the freezer kicked on every 17 minutes. The front doors settled in their frame when trucks passed on the avenue. The office chair squeaked whenever Calvin leaned back to rub his bad knee. Those ordinary sounds became my map. So when something happened outside the pattern, even something small, I felt it before I understood it. 3 weeks passed before I noticed the man. At first, I only recognized the pattern after it had repeated enough times to feel deliberate. That was what frightened me most. He had been there before my fear had a name for him. He had already studied the corners of the store while I was busy teaching myself not to look afraid. He came in on Wednesdays, always between 8:50 and 9 p.m. tall, maybe early 40s, gray sweatshirt, black jeans, shoes worn flat on the outside edges. He never bought anything. He would drift through candy, pet food, laundry detergent, then stand near the coolers pretending to read labels. But his eyes were never on the shelves. They were on the mirrors mounted near the ceiling, the cameras, the hallway doors. The fourth time he came in, I was crouched in aisle 6, cutting open a box of toilet paper with a dull safety blade, when I heard him behind me. "They leave you here by yourself?" His voice was calm, almost friendly. Too close. I did not turn around. "Store closes soon," I said. He did not answer. When I finally looked toward the front, he was already leaving, hands in his pockets, walking like he knew I would watch. The next morning I told Calvin. He shrugged, but his eyes moved toward the front windows. "You get strange people in these stores," he said. "Keep your spray on you." Then the woman came. It was Wednesday again, November 29th, 12 minutes before closing. She looked completely out of place. Blonde hair pinned neatly, navy blazer, clean heels, a leather bag on her shoulder. She walked the shampoo aisle for less than a minute before coming straight to the counter. "You work here full-time?" she asked. I nodded. "You seem calm," she said. "That is rare. A lot of people in your position carry everything on their face." I felt my stomach tighten. She smiled as if she had meant it as a compliment. "I help run a women's support project in Huntington. Trauma recovery, job placement, safe housing. Sometimes people just need one person to say, 'You deserve better.'" I kept my face flat. "I'm okay." She leaned in slightly. Her perfume smelled like citrus and something chemical. "You're not what I expected." It was the way she said it. Not disappointed. Not surprised. Assessing. That night, after Calvin left to take a phone call in his truck, I went into the office and rewound the security footage. The man had arrived first and parked near the dumpsters. 5 minutes later, the woman had pulled in beside him in the same dark SUV, but she entered from the front while he walked around toward the rear. They never looked at each other on camera, but they moved like parts of the same machine. At 9:18 p.m., after we locked the doors, the feed to the back hallway froze. Just 6 seconds. When it came back, someone was standing at the emergency exit, trying the handle. Once. Twice. Slowly. I did not scream. I did not run for the front. I crawled into the janitor's closet, locked it from the inside, and texted Calvin with shaking fingers. "Someone is at the back door. Come now." 9 minutes later, his truck lights swept across the rear lot. I saw the SUV peel away before he even got inside. The police came after that. They watched the tape. A deputy named Harlan said other stores had reported something similar in small towns along the river. A man and a woman. Late shifts. Women working alone. Friendly conversation first, then a back door, a frozen camera, a missing window of time. I never clocked in again. I stayed at a shelter 2 towns over for a while. I slept with a chair wedged under the knob. I stopped going out on Wednesdays. I still hear that woman's voice when a stranger is too kind too quickly. "You're not what I expected." And sometimes, when I am standing in a bright store with cameras in every corner, I wonder about the women who were exactly what she expected. So let me ask you this. If someone offers help in the exact words you needed to hear, how long would it take you to notice they were not trying to save you at all? I had a talent for acting normal when nothing inside me was. I think I learned it young, watching my mother move through rooms with a polite smile while the house around us filled with things no one was allowed to say. I carried that habit into adulthood, right into a relationship with a man named Evan, who lied so easily that I started doubting the truth even when it was in my hands. When I found out he had been seeing someone else for months, I did not scream. I did not break anything. I woke up one rainy Thursday in late January, put my phone in airplane mode, took my keys, and left Tallahassee without a single dramatic word. The drive south felt less like freedom than shock. I stayed off the interstate as long as I could, rolling through narrow roads lined with wet pine trees and old gas stations with handwritten signs. I did not turn on music. I just listened to the tires and the sound of my own breathing until both started to feel strange. By 8:20 p.m., I had reached the edge of Valdosta, Georgia. I checked into a cheap motel called Blue Heron Inn, the kind with peeling blue doors, buzzing outdoor lights, and a front desk clerk who never looked up from his phone. The lobby smelled like stale coffee and old rain. A plastic plant leaned in the corner beside a brochure rack full of sun-bleached pamphlets for attractions that were hours away. When he slid the key card across the counter, he did not ask how long I was staying. I think people who work in places like that learn not to ask questions they do not want answered. My room smelled like damp carpet and lemon cleaner, but the sheets looked clean enough. I sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, and stared at the ceiling fan turning above me. That was when I realized I had not eaten all day. There was a Family Dollar 4 blocks away, still lit, sitting beside a closed laundromat and a nail salon with blacked-out windows. The walk there should have taken 5 minutes, but I kept stopping at corners and listening behind me. I was not scared of Evan following me. That was the strange part. I was scared of the blank space my life had become, of the fact that no one knew exactly where I was, and no one would know quickly if I disappeared from it. I told myself I would be in and out in 10 minutes. Crackers, water, maybe one of those frozen dinners you regret before you even open it. When I stepped inside, the warmth hit me first. Then the smell of cardboard, cheap detergent, and candy. A woman in scrubs stood at the register with a basket full of paper towels. The cashier was a man in his late 20s with sandy hair and tired-looking eyes. His name tag said Miles. "Rough night to be walking," he said. I gave a small smile. "Just passing through." "Everybody is," he said. I did not know what to do with that, so I went to the food aisle. The store was almost empty, and for a moment the quiet felt comforting. I wandered longer than I meant to. Canned soup, instant noodles, a freezer with 2 dinners left, and frost around the door seal. I chose one, grabbed aspirin and a bottle of water, then returned to the register. The woman in scrubs was gone. Miles scanned my items slowly. "You staying close?" "One night," I said. "Then I keep moving." He nodded. "We're here till 10:15 if you need anything else." It was the word "we" that stayed with me. There was no one else there. No footsteps in the aisles. No voice from the office. Just Miles and the buzz of the lights. I walked back to the motel with my bag tight against my chest. Nothing happened. No one followed. The parking lot was empty except for my car and 2 work trucks. For a few hours, I almost convinced myself I had made the whole night feel worse than it was. At 2:12 a.m., I woke up needing the bathroom and noticed a white slip of paper tucked beneath my windshield wiper. I watched it from behind the curtain for a long time before I went outside. The paper was folded once. Written inside, in narrow block letters, were 6 words. "Glad you got back safe." I had not told Miles the motel name. I had not told him which direction I was walking. I had not even told him my name. I did not sleep after that. I sat in the dark, one hand on my keys, watching the lot until sunrise. Nothing moved. That almost made it worse. The next night, I did something stupid. I went back. Part of me wanted a normal explanation. Maybe he saw me walk toward the motel. Maybe he left the note thinking it was sweet, not terrifying. Maybe if I asked him directly, the fear would shrink into awkwardness and I could leave town without carrying it with me. Miles was behind the counter when I walked in. He looked more awake this time, almost expectant. "You came back," he said. "I needed water," I lied. His smile widened. "I thought about you last night." My hand tightened around the bottle. He noticed. "Not in a weird way," he said. "You just looked lonely." Lonely. Not tired. Not sad. Lonely. Like he had been studying me. He leaned closer while the register printed. "I get a break in 12 minutes. You could stay. Talk a little." I forced my voice to stay even. "Another time." He did not argue. He only watched me leave. I felt his eyes on my back all the way through the glass doors. The second note appeared the following night, taped to the motel door. "You don't have to be alone." I packed immediately. My hands shook so badly that I dropped my toothbrush twice. I put my bag in the car, sat behind the wheel, and tried to decide whether to call the police. But what would I say? A cashier maybe left 2 notes? A man who knew I was alone had not technically threatened me. I decided I would leave at dawn. That felt reasonable. Less dramatic. Less paranoid. At 3:42 a.m., 3 soft taps landed on the door. They were not the knocks of someone needing help. They were not loud enough to wake the neighboring rooms or urgent enough to demand an answer. They were careful, personal, the kind of knock you make when you know the person inside is already awake. Then silence. 3 more taps. Then the knob moved. I ran. I grabbed my wallet and keys, no shoes, no jacket, and slipped through the bathroom window because the front door was not safe anymore. The pavement was cold under my bare feet. I made it to my car and locked the doors before I looked back. Someone stood at the corner of the building, half outside the glow of the motel light. Still, patient, watching. I drove until the sky turned gray. I stayed with an old friend near Mobile and told her only the parts that sounded believable. 3 days later, I called the Family Dollar and asked for Miles. My thumb hovered over the call button for almost 10 minutes before I pressed it. I expected the sound of his voice. I expected him to laugh or act confused or say something that proved he knew exactly where I was. Instead, the phone rang 5 times and a woman answered with the bored flatness of someone folding receipts while she talked. The woman who answered paused. Nobody by that name works here. I checked the receipts in my purse. No cashier name, just cashier 041. Months later, I found the store on Street View. In the blurred image, someone stood just inside the front glass. The face was distorted by reflection, but I knew the shape of him. I still do not know who he was. I do not know how he knew where I slept. But I know this: being noticed is not the same thing as being cared for. If a stranger makes you feel seen only because he has been watching you first, is that loneliness answering back, or is it something much darker? My name is Noah Sutter. I'm 31, born in Mesa, Arizona, and for most of my life I believed ordinary plans could protect you. Get the job, pay the rent, cook dinner, build something that does not fall apart when the month turns ugly. For a while, I had that illusion. I worked system support for a small software company, shared a 1-bedroom apartment with my girlfriend, Mila, and let myself believe the future had a shape. Then in March, the company folded with almost no warning. On a Monday, we were talking about hiring 2 new developers. By Friday, our badges stopped working, and the CEO sent a message full of words like transition and gratitude. My savings started draining immediately. Job applications went nowhere. Mila tried to be patient, but patience has an expiration date when every conversation becomes rent, bills, and what now. She left on May 18th, put her key beside the sink, took her coat from the hook, and left her coffee mug behind. That detail bothered me more than it should have. A friend named Derek lived in San Antonio and said I could sleep on his couch. He even knew someone at a marketing agency that might need contract IT help. I packed my Civic with 2 duffel bags, my desktop tower, a box of old photos, and the few things Mila did not want. I left before sunrise and drove east until my eyes burned. Somewhere outside Balmorhea, Texas, I stopped at a motel called Mesa Lantern Inn. I do not like talking about what happened there. Not fully. But I need to explain what came after, because the fear did not end when I left that room. It followed me into fluorescent light, into a name tag, into a Family Dollar on East Riverside. The job came fast. Too fast, maybe. The assistant manager, Tanya, hired me after a 5-minute conversation. She did not ask about the gap in my resume or why my hands shook when I filled out the tax forms. She looked at me once, looked at the empty schedule pinned beside the office door, and decided I was useful. At the time, I mistook that for luck. Later, I learned that desperate people and understaffed stores recognize each other immediately. She had a daughter in preschool, a smoker's rasp, and the kind of bluntness that made honesty feel less optional. The store closed at 11:15 p.m. Most nights were nothing. Mop spills, face shelves, count returns, lock the doors, breathe. One Sunday in early June, Tanya was counting the till while I rearranged batteries in aisle 6. It was 10:37 p.m. when the door chime buzzed. A man walked in carrying a dirty cardboard box. Hood low, face shadowed, no car outside. "I need to return a fan," he said. The box was dented and wrapped in old tape. It did not match anything we sold. I told him we needed a receipt or a barcode. He smiled in a way that made the skin along my arms tighten. "It's already been paid for." Before I could answer, Tanya stepped out and asked what was happening. I turned toward her for half a second. When I looked back, the man was gone. The door had not chimed. The box was gone too. Tanya thought I was overtired. I wanted to believe her. Later, while sweeping aisle 6, I found a receipt on the floor folded perfectly in half. It had printed from our register at 10:39 p.m. There were no items listed. At the top was my full name, Noah Daniel Sutter. Where the subtotal should have been, it said, "You never left room 8." My mouth went dry. Room 8 was the room I had taken at Mesa Lantern Inn. I showed Tanya. She did not laugh. She checked the register history and found nothing. No transaction, no print record, just the paper in my hand, warm as if it had come out seconds before. The next afternoon, I arrived early and found a Polaroid on top of my lunch bag in the break room. It showed my Civic parked outside the motel, taken from the exact angle of the stairwell. I had never posted the motel online. I had never sent anyone a picture. I had barely looked at the place myself before leaving. The break room camera had cut to static for 52 seconds before I walked in. After that, things started to appear. A white box fan in pristine condition, even though inventory said none existed. It sat on the shelf with its cord wrapped neatly in the original twist tie, the cardboard bright and uncreased, like it had never passed through a warehouse or a truck or anyone's hands. I stood in front of it for almost a full minute before I touched it, and when I did, the box felt faintly cold. Shelf labels shifted to aisle numbers we did not have. Notes in the return bin that read, "He is still behind the walls." Once, while locking the mop closet, I heard someone breathing from the other side of the drywall. Tanya started carrying pepper spray clipped to her belt. She told me the building used to be a pharmacy in the 80s, and that an overnight guard had vanished during a summer storm. They found his flashlight still on in aisle 6. They did not find him. I looked it up. She was not lying. The last night I worked there was a Thursday. Tanya had left early because her daughter had a fever, and I stayed to fix inventory tags after a system update. I had headphones in, volume too loud, trying to drown out the feeling that the store was listening. At 11:48 p.m., the emergency exit alarm beeped once. Then again. Then silence. I pulled out my headphones and moved toward the back. As I passed aisle 6, he was there. Same hoodie. Same box. This time he was not smiling. He held out a receipt with something written on the back. "Check your locker." He kept the key. I ran to the break room. My locker door was already cracked open. Inside was not my bag. It was a motel matchbook from Mesa Lantern Inn and a brass room key stamped with an 8. I quit the next morning without notice. I told Derek I would find remote work and stop leaving the apartment after dark. I write product descriptions now for a furniture site. It pays badly, but no one prints receipts with my name on them at 11:48 p.m. At least, not at work. Sometimes I still find them under my door. No items, no total. Just my name, a room number, and once the words, "He's almost through." So if a stranger ever hands you a receipt with your name on it, and you know you never bought anything, would you ask who printed it? Or would you already know the answer is worse than that? It's strange what comfort can look like when you have gone without it long enough. A dry room, a warm light, someone asking if you are hungry. If you are desperate, those things start to feel like rescue. That is how they get close. The day I reached Crossett, Arkansas, rain had been falling since morning in thin, stubborn sheets. My phone kept buzzing with payment reminders I could not pay and messages I did not have the strength to open. I had been living out of my car for almost 7 weeks, sleeping in parking lots, chasing Wi-Fi, applying for gigs that disappeared as soon as they looked real. I had not seen my dog in over a month because my sister was keeping him until I got steady again. By 6:55 p.m., my tank was nearly empty, and I had $6.80 in change. I had started measuring my life in amounts that small. Miles left before empty. Coins in the ashtray. Minutes before a parking lot security guard noticed me. A person can become very practical when everything else is gone, and that practicality can look a lot like surrender. I pulled into a Family Dollar on Pine Street mostly because the lights were on, and I thought I could afford a burrito from the cooler. When I stepped inside, the warmth hit me hard enough to make my throat close. The store smelled like citrus cleaner, dust, and wet cardboard. Behind the register stood a young woman in a blue hoodie with a high ponytail and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "You okay?" she asked. Not casually, not like a cashier forced to speak, like she already knew the answer. "I'm fine," I said, and my voice cracked on the lie. She nodded toward the back. "Cooler markdowns are on the bottom shelf if you're hungry." Her name was Jessa. I learned that later. At first, she was just the person who did not kick me out for walking slowly through aisles I could not afford. I picked up soup, put it back. Picked up crackers, put them back too. The rain kept tapping against the glass, and the longer I stayed inside, the harder it became to imagine walking back out. After the last customer left, Jessa came down the aisle carrying a mop. "You local?" "No, passing through." She nodded like she had expected that. "My uncle helps people sometimes, people who need a place for the night." Every warning inside me woke up at once. I should have said no immediately, but I had not slept dry in days. I had not eaten a real meal in longer. So I said, "Just to talk." She smiled faintly. "Just to talk." She led me past the employee bathroom, past a break room with a flickering light, to a back office door that was already half open. A man in his 60s sat inside wearing black slacks, a maroon sweater, and glasses that reflected the ceiling light, so I could not see his eyes clearly. "Nolan, right?" he said. I froze. "Jessa," he added, as if that explained how he knew my name. It did not. I had not told her either. He introduced himself as Howard and motioned to a folding chair. "I've got a cot in the stock room, food, water, and a little cash for the road tomorrow. No pressure." "What's the catch?" "No catch," he said too quickly. That should have been enough. It should have sent me back into the rain. Instead, I followed him. I remember thinking that if something bad was going to happen, at least it would happen somewhere warm. That is not a brave thought or even a rational one. It is the kind of thought your mind offers when it is too exhausted to protect you properly. The cot was set up behind stacks of sealed boxes and old seasonal decorations. It smelled faintly of bleach and mildew. A plastic bin beside it held granola bars, water, socks, and a clean towel. I ate slowly, ashamed of how good it felt to accept anything. Around 10:05 p.m., I heard the front doors lock from the outside. I told myself that was normal. Employees locked stores. That was what doors did. At midnight, I woke and saw Howard through the break room window. He stood completely still, staring in. The room behind him was dark, but the light from the vending machine caught the lenses of his glasses. 2 white squares. No face. No expression. Just the impression of a person who did not need to hide because he had decided I was already too tired to run. No movement. No blinking. Just watching like he was making sure I was still where he had left me. In the morning, my duffel bag had been moved. Nothing obvious was missing, but the zipper was open and the journal I kept in my hoodie had dog-eared pages. The pen I used was snapped in half under the cot. When I confronted Jessa, she stood behind the register with a small smile. "People take what they think you won't miss," she said. Then she went back to counting change. Later that afternoon, Howard handed me an envelope. Inside was $280. "No strings?" I asked. "Most people say that the first morning," he said. "It doesn't mean they keep saying it." I tried to give it back, but he would not take it. He only tapped the envelope once and walked away. I stayed a second night because desperation makes stupidity feel practical. I set an alarm. I slept with my bag looped around my arm. At 2:17 a.m., the stockroom door creaked open an inch, then stopped. No one spoke. No footsteps came closer. The door just stayed there, breathing darkness into the room. At dawn, I moved the cot quietly, climbed through an emergency delivery hatch I had noticed the day before, and slipped into the muddy back lot. I did not run until I heard footsteps behind me. Slow ones. Measured ones. The kind that knew there was no need to hurry. I cut through an alley, crossed a yard, and pounded on the side door of a house with kitchen lights on. A woman looked through the curtain. I begged her to call the police. She hesitated because I looked exactly like someone you hesitate to help. But she called. By the time officers arrived, Howard was gone. The store employees said no man by that name worked there. There was no cot. No supplies. No camera footage from the stockroom because the system had been down overnight. Jessa said I must have slept somewhere else and come back confused. I did not argue. I knew how I looked. Weeks later, in a motel 2 counties north, I searched reviews of that store because fear makes you want proof. Most were normal. Long lines, empty shelves, rude staff. But one cached review, posted by someone named Caleb, said, "Don't stay. Don't say yes. The second night costs more." When I refreshed, it was gone. Now when I pass a Family Dollar, I cross the street. I still sleep in my car sometimes, but I lock every door twice. I keep food in sealed packages and mark the water bottles with a pen before I sleep. I know how that sounds. I know what kind of person that makes me look like. But once you have seen generosity turn its head and stare at you through glass at midnight, caution stops feeling dramatic. I never accept food I did not open myself. And whenever kindness comes too easily, I hear Howard's voice saying, "No pressure." If someone offers you shelter when the world has left you outside, how do you know it is mercy and not a leash? I was never supposed to be in Lovelock, Nevada. Not in March. Not that far west. Not alone with a dead phone and a rental car full of everything I could still pretend mattered. I had stopped paying attention to where I should be sometime in late November, after the startup I had given 3 years to finally collapsed. We had used every hopeful word before the end. Pivot, restructure, bridge funding, strategic pause. All it meant was that the money was gone and nobody wanted to say dead. By February, my lease in Portland had ended. I sold what I could, boxed what I could not, and watched my fiancée Mara pull away from the curb in a rideshare without turning around. I remember the small things about that morning more clearly than the big ones. The scrape of cardboard on the hallway floor. The smell of coffee from the downstairs neighbor's apartment. The fact that Mara had forgotten one glove on the windowsill, and I stood there holding it like it could explain the last 6 months. That was the last time I saw her in person. I rented a compact Kia, packed clothes, my laptop, a hard drive with outdated resumes, and started driving. I was not looking for a new life. I was just trying to put enough road between me and the old one that I could breathe. It was 9:12 p.m. on a Thursday when I pulled off exit 61 outside Lovelock. My phone was at 2%. My eyes hurt from too much highway and not enough sleep. I wanted gas, a charger, something with salt in it, and maybe a motel room where the door locked properly. That was when I saw the Family Dollar. It sat in a mostly empty strip mall beside a closed pet grooming shop and a tax office with newspaper taped over the windows. The sign was bright, almost too bright against the desert dark. The parking lot was empty except for dust moving in thin waves across the asphalt. Something about the place looked staged, like a set built for a town no one lived in anymore. I parked anyway. Inside, the air smelled like floor cleaner and fake vanilla. The floors shone. The shelves were full and unnaturally straight. Every label faced forward. Every can sat exactly behind the one in front of it. There were no torn packages, no abandoned baskets, no crushed receipts near the register. Even the clearance bin looked arranged, as if someone had placed each useless item with tweezers. That should have made the store feel cared for. Instead, it made it feel untouched. No music played. No customers moved between aisles. The only sound was the ceiling unit humming with a steady, insect-like vibration. One employee stood at the register. Early 20s, shaved head, pale skin. He did not greet me. He did not even look up. I walked slowly through the aisles, pretending I had a list. Beef jerky, off-brand energy drink, wall charger. I knew I should leave, but exhaustion can make warnings feel distant, like someone else's thoughts. At the counter, the cashier scanned my items in silence. When he handed me the bag, our fingers touched. His skin was cold. Not cool. Cold like something kept too long in a freezer. He looked up then. His eyes were red around the edges, but not tired. Focused. Empty in a way that felt worse than anger. "Have a good night," I said because habit is stronger than instinct. He said nothing. Outside, I realized I had forgotten the USB cord. I turned back immediately. The glass doors clicked shut behind me. For 1 second I was annoyed more than afraid, the ordinary irritation of someone who has to make a second trip because his brain is running on fumes. That ordinary feeling vanished so fast it felt cut away. I reached for the handle. Locked. The store lights went out all at once. I stood there blinking at my reflection. Behind it, deep in one of the aisles, something shifted. Not the cashier. Something taller, thin and still, as if it had been waiting for the lights to die before showing itself. I stepped back and saw the Durango. Navy blue. Older model. Fogged windows. Parked directly beside my rental car. Engine running. It had not been there when I went inside. Then, from inside the dark store, I heard 4 taps. Tap. Tap. Pause. Tap. Measured. Deliberate. I turned toward my car and heard the same rhythm again, this time against glass. Tap. Tap. Pause. Tap. My passenger window was fogged from the inside. Pressed against it was a pale hand. Human almost. I ran. I yanked open the driver's door, threw myself in, and started the engine without checking the back seat. I reversed hard enough that the tires slipped on the dusty pavement. The Durango did not move. In the rearview mirror, it was suddenly empty. No exhaust. No engine vibration. Just an old SUV sitting silent like it had been abandoned for weeks. I drove toward the highway, telling myself I would not look back. A mile later, the rental's dash started glitching. Fuel gauge first, then Bluetooth. Then the entire console went black for 3 seconds. My headlights flickered twice, and the engine died. I coasted onto the shoulder. My phone was dead. I got out and lifted the hood like I understood cars. The desert around me was completely silent. It was the kind of silence that had weight. No insects. No traffic. No hum from distant buildings. Even the wind seemed to pause while I stood there with one hand on the metal hood and the other gripping my dead phone, understanding too late how small a person is beside an empty highway. Then I saw headlights far behind me, moving slowly. Too slowly. Not passing. Watching. I slammed the hood and searched the glove box for anything useful. Nothing. When I looked again, the headlights were gone. I started walking. Not back toward the Family Dollar. Not toward the lights, just along the road, into the dark, because movement felt like the only choice left. After maybe 25 minutes, I saw a diner sign. Dim yellow letters. A truck parked outside. A man smoking near the entrance, looking up at the sky. I told him everything in broken pieces. He listened without interrupting. Then he said very quietly, "That strip mall burned last month. Electrical fire. Whole block's been dark since." I turned back toward the road I had come from. There was nothing there. No red sign. No glowing windows. No store. Just desert. The police never found a receipt. My rental was recovered exactly where I had left it, and it started on the first try when the mechanic checked it. No battery issue. No fault codes. Nothing to explain why I walked out of a store that did not exist. I sleep with lights on now. I do not trust automatic doors. I do not trust clean, quiet stores at the edge of towns, because sometimes a place does not need to be open to let you in. And if a door that should not exist opens for you, would you trust your fear and walk away, or would you do what I did and step inside? Long before that night, I had already started to feel like I was fading out of my own life. Not dramatically, not all at once, just a slow wearing away at the edges until I could look in a mirror and feel delayed, like my reflection was trying to remember me. My name is Mika Rowan. I was 25, living in a borrowed apartment above a tire shop in Henderson, Nevada, telling everyone it was temporary. My father died unexpectedly after my 3rd year at Arizona State, and everything that had seemed stable loosened at the same time. Tuition, rent, grief, all of it stacked until the only option left was my aunt's place while she stayed with her boyfriend in Phoenix. Family Dollar was supposed to be filler. Night shifts. Some money. Time to figure out whether I could re-enroll in January. I told myself I could survive anything temporary, which is one of the lies people use when they are too tired to make better plans. The apartment above the tire shop rattled whenever the compressor downstairs kicked on, and at night the whole place smelled faintly of rubber and rainwater. Still, it had a lock, a couch, and an outlet for my phone. That was enough to call it a life for a while. My manager, Gina, was sharp, practical, and always smelled faintly of menthol cigarettes. She called everyone Han, but never warmly. Still, she was fair, and that counted for a lot. The store on Horizon Ridge closed at 11 p.m. Most nights, I liked the rhythm. Cooler fans, cardboard, cheap detergent, the same customers arriving at the same times. By closing, I was usually alone, and I liked that too until I started noticing small things. The backroom buzzer would ring when no one was there. Shelf tags shifted by a few inches. A car would idle near the dumpsters too long, lights off. Once, just after 10:30, I saw someone standing beside the rear fence, not smoking, not looking at a phone, just standing perfectly still. Gina said faulty wiring and bored teenagers. I wanted to believe her. On a Friday in late August, my closing partner called in sick. Gina sighed over the phone and asked if I could handle solo closing. "I'll be fine," I said. I was not sure. The shift dragged. Heat pressed against the windows even after dark. I checked in 6 crates of inventory, drank a warm energy drink on my break, and watched the front lot more than I watched the clock. Every reflection in the glass looked like movement. Every pair of headlights slowing near the entrance made me straighten behind the counter. I kept telling myself that fear becomes a habit if you feed it, but the body does not care about logic when it has already decided something is wrong. At 10:43 p.m., I locked the front doors and began closing. Trash, counters, drawer count, routine. I liked routine because each task had an ending. The register either balanced or it did not. The trash was either out or it was not. There was comfort in problems small enough to solve with a key, a mop, or a printed report. Then the backroom buzzer rang. Not the front chime, the employee entrance buzzer. I checked the camera monitor. The rear lot was empty except for the dumpster and a flattened box sliding in the wind. I locked the hallway door anyway, then returned to the counter. At 10:56, someone knocked on the front glass. A man in a red hoodie stood outside with his hood pulled low and his hands in his pockets. I hesitated, then opened the door because technically we still had 4 minutes before close. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't know you were closing." "We're almost closed," I replied. "Car trouble," he said, glancing toward the lot. "My friend's coming, but I left my phone. I just need a flashlight and maybe tape." He moved slowly toward aisle 4. Too slowly. The lights buzzed above him and flickered once. I watched him on the monitor as he pretended to browse. That was when I saw camera 2. A figure crouched beside the rear employee door, low to the ground, holding something long and thin. Metal, maybe a pry bar. The man in the red hoodie was a distraction. "Hey," I called. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "You said your friend was out back?" He paused. "No, just me." Too quick. My hand moved under the counter and found the panic button. It made no sound when I pressed it. I could only hope it worked. "I'll check on that flashlight," I said. I walked to the storage hallway, locked the door behind me, and grabbed the aluminum bat from beside the mop sink. On the monitor, the hoodie man moved toward the counter again. Outside, the crouched figure disappeared from camera 2. Then camera 3 caught him. He was running toward the back employee entrance, the one I had locked less than a minute earlier. He grabbed the handle and pulled hard. Nothing. He froze for 1 second, as if confused that the plan had failed, then ran. The hoodie man inside turned and left without buying anything, without speaking, without even looking toward the hallway where I stood holding the bat with both hands. Police arrived 13 minutes later. Deputy Lowell watched the footage and said the same thing 3 different ways. They were working together. They had done it before. I had done the right thing. That did not make me feel better. The scariest part was not what happened. It was the space around what almost happened. I kept replaying alternate versions of the night, each one only a few seconds different. In one, I did not lock the hall door. In one, I stepped outside to check the buzzer. In one, I decided the man in the hoodie was harmless because he sounded embarrassed and cold. Every version ended in darkness. I could not make myself imagine fully. If I had not locked the hallway door, if I had stepped into the back lot, if I had believed the man's voice because he sounded calm and needed help. For the next few shifts, I carried pepper spray and checked the locks until Gina told me I was going to wear the handles off. 3 nights later, a woman and her little boy banged on the glass at 11:27 p.m. Rain soaked their hair. The boy was maybe 6, too young to fake the kind of fear on his face. Still, I saw the red hoodie first. I saw the pry bar. I saw the back door handle moving in silence. Fear had made a template inside me, and for one ugly second it tried to lay that template over a crying child. Their car had stalled. The boy was crying into a stuffed dinosaur. My hand hovered over the lock. For half a second, I hated what fear had made of me. Then I opened the door. I made them hot chocolate in the break room and called roadside assistance. The woman thanked me, but I could see in her face that she had noticed my hesitation. That stayed with me too. 2 weeks later, a man with a soft voice came in with a stack of dollar bills and asked whether I worked alone. Asked what time we closed. Asked if the cameras all worked. He said his name was Trevor, and he used to manage a store in Tucson. I lied and said my co-worker was unloading a truck in the back. He smiled but did not buy anything. I quit the following Monday. Gina did not ask why. Maybe she had worked there long enough to know when a person had seen the edge of something and could not stand near it anymore. Now I work day shifts at a rental car desk near the airport. I park under lights. I never ignore the small tightening in my stomach. And I never assume danger will look dangerous. Sometimes it asks for tape. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it counts on you opening the door because you do not want to be cruel. So what is the cost of ignoring your instincts when someone asks for help and something deeper than politeness is begging you not to let them in?